Five, four, three, two, one, right?
We're on live. Go, buddy.
All right. We're live. Welcoming everyone to Stadium College Football Live here on the Fan Cred app. I'm Matt Hayes from Bleacher Report, and I'm joined here by Brett McMurphy of Stadium. It's almost game time, people. Almost. Week one's upon us. Ball's here. We're excited to roll through the season preview with you tonight. We'll be joined soon by Michael Felder of Stadium, and later with Scott Seidenberg of NBC Sports Radio. And if you want to join us, you can do it in two ways. In the Fan Cred app, press the fan line button on the top right corner, and our producer will get you face-to-face with us. Or you can ask your questions in the comments directly below. Brett, my friend, let's get right into it, man. It's the world according to Clemson and Alabama right now in college football because, as we all know, you cannot begin any discussion in this game right now without these two heavyweights. So right out of the box, if Clemson rolls through the season and does whatever he thinks they're going to do, and they get to that playoff and they win it all again for 3 times in the last 4 years, have they officially replaced big, bad Alabama as the king of college football?
Absolutely. On the short term, I don't think, long term, no. Short term, absolutely, yes. And if you don't like Alabama and Clemson, do something about it. Beat them. Nobody has really done that. The last 4 years, Alabama and Clemson have played 110 games against other teams other than Alabama and Clemson. They are 106-4 in those 110 games.
That's awesome.
So nobody has beat them. Yes, we're going to see Clemson, Alabama Part 5. It's just whether it's in the semis or whether it's in the finals. I know Alabama's got some injury news that's hurt them defensively.
Yeah,
they will dominate the SEC.
Yeah, the loss of Dylan Moses at middle linebacker is tough. That's a tough loss. He's kind of like the heart of that defense. But come on, you're Nick Saban. You lose one guy and you got another 5-star just waiting there in the wings ready to go. So it's not as bad as it would be like if, say, I don't know, let's say like Mississippi State loses its starting middle linebacker. Then they're in trouble. With Alabama, it's just, all right, we'll just float another guy in there. We're good. And I think it's clearly that's where they're at right now. There's this narrative, Brett, that's kind of floating around, and it even started last year during the playoff, that it's getting boring now watching Alabama and Clemson. My take on that is, you got to be kidding me. Why would you not want to watch the two most talented teams in the country play for the biggest championship in the country, play for it all on prime time when everybody's watching? Why would you not want that? Your thoughts?
If you don't want to watch the two best teams in the country, then rewatch week 0 from last week. That's what you're going to get. And by the way, if Florida's the number 8 team in the country, then Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia are light years ahead of everybody else. Not even close.
So, okay, we're going to bring Michael Felder in here from Stadium, and I'm going to get Michael's thoughts on this as well as week 0, because I want to get into a little bit about week 0 that I think everybody kind of overlooks. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for joining us. So, Michael, we're right out of the box. We're talking about, the heavyweights, Alabama and Clemson, and how it's their world and we're all just living in it. And I kind of think, yeah, okay, great. I want the two best teams. I want to see them. Do you get bored with Alabama and Clemson? Or will you be bored if they're in it again, the final again?
No. I think to me, just as a football guy, it's about elevating yourself. And I don't want Alabama and Clemson to fall off so that somebody else can take their spot. I'd like to see whether it's Ohio State or it's Michigan or it is Georgia or it's Oklahoma or it's USC or Oregon or Washington. I'd like to see those teams elevate to that level. And I think that's the way that I look at football, where I don't want people to come back to the pack. I want people to move up to the top. And it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some recruiting, and it's going to take some effort.
So you're good then with Alabama and Clemson, and really with Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Georgia basically running college football since the CFP began in 2014. You're all good with that?
Absolutely fine with it. Listen, let the cream rise to the top. I separate the wheat from the chaff. Don't need any of it.
You don't want like a Mississippi State getting there somehow at some point?
If Mississippi State would have played the way they could play in 20 or
14,
20, yeah, then they would have been in there, because that was a team that was ready, but they played scared against Alabama, and then we saw things fall apart. So to me, I want to see teams that are ready to go out and make things happen.
So, Michael, we were just getting into this week 0 thing, and I have heard a lot of complaints about week 0, and you hear fans talking about, well, this is what happens when you play a week early, and They didn't play a week early. They've all practiced for the same amount. But it does bring up a larger point. Those 4 teams, Florida, Miami, Arizona, and Hawaii, combined for 40 penalties and 13 turnovers. And I've had at least 5 coaches text me this week and tell me they're literally scared to death of this weekend because they don't hit anymore. And because they don't hit anymore, you cannot simulate what you're going to see on the field game 1, and you can't simulate that athleticism, that speed. And the problem then becomes, what happens now? Are we going to see a lot of the same stuff in week 1, the same mistakes that we saw with week 0?
Absolutely. The only difference is week 1, most teams don't play real games. And so they're playing FCS opponents. They're playing lower tier FBS opponents. So it's still going to be sloppy. It's still going to be ugly. They just Miami, Florida, Hawaii, and Arizona got theirs out of the way early, and they'll get to it the next time. But the biggest thing for me is we also got to see real nice glimpses of these ball clubs. So I think that obviously from the penalty standpoint, from some miscommunications, from young guys being put on a big stage, at the end of the day, that's what week 1 looks like, whether it's week 0 or week 1. An extra week of practice, those guys aren't going to get any better because they're not going to do anything different.
All right, Michael, we're going to bring Brett back in as well. Brett, I want to get both your guys' thoughts on this. So we've got basically 4 key transfer quarterbacks right now in college football. And I want to get your opinions on who's going to have the biggest impact. We got Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma, Justin Fields at Ohio State, Kelly Bryant at Missouri, Jacob Eason at Washington. Michael, you go first.
For me, like Kyler Murray had 10 300-yard passing games, and they needed every ounce of yardage that they got from him. They needed all the touchdowns that they got from him, and you're not going to get that from Jalen Hurts. So I'm very curious to see what this is a humongous chance for Lincoln Riley to show what he can do with a completely different offense from what he has a season ago. Jacob Eason, he was named the starter, and even reading the language, they settled on starter Jacob Eason. He was named the starter. It wasn't about him winning the gig, and I think that speaks volumes. And I wish Jake Hayner would stick in there because he's a Chris Peterson quarterback, and I think he would have an opportunity to get in the game and play. So Eason will go out and make some plays. Justin Fields, I want to see how they change this offense for him. And then obviously Kelly Bryant, I think he's still a guy that we're going to watch and see if he can throw the ball down the field. As far as the results, I think that for Oklahoma, the expectations are higher. So for Jalen Hurts, if he doesn't live up to those expectations, I think that he's going to be in a situation where they will put Spencer Rattler in the game because he does fit into what they want to do with Baker Mayfield, with Kyler Murray. Like if you watch preseason NFL highlights even, and you see what Kyler and Baker are doing from a throwing standpoint, and we know Jalen Hurts can't do that, then he's going to be in a tough spot trying to do that. And what are we going to do? We're going to have CeeDee Lamb and Grant Calcaterra blocking for 55 plays a game because all they can do is run. I don't know if that's a thing you want to have happen. So I think the expectations are higher for him, which means ceiling, which means that the opportunity for failure is bigger. For me, I think Kelly Bryant's in the best spot to have the biggest season because he's someone who, with lower expectations, with a run game that's going to be good. I think that them with Larry Roundtree, they have an opportunity to make big things happen. I don't think he's going to wow the world with his arm, but they trust that run game very well. And they trust that run game very much. And I think that's going to be the differentiator because they also have a coach in Barry Odom running the football versus Lincoln Riley, who does want to throw it around.
Right.
So I think that's a big difference. And then we get to Eason. I'd like to see him realistically, and we always talk vision boards, me and KB on the show, and realistically, he should be a guy that's throwing for 2,800 plus yards. And we'll see if he can do that. I still feel like there's uncertainty surrounding him, but we'll see what happens. And I think it's going to be a very interesting thing. And with Justin Fields, this is a complete ball in the air experiment. He's supremely talented. He could have the best year out of all of them, but if I'm betting my money on it, I'm going to go Kelly Bryant, Jacob Eason, then I'll go Justin Fields, and Jalen Hurts will be my fourth.
So, Brett, you've been liking Kelly Bryant now for the last couple of months. You've been talking about him. What are your thoughts on the transfers?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, obviously, he's of the 4, he's the only one that's not playing on a team that won their conference last year. So I think all those guys, they've got nowhere to go but down. If they win the conference title, hey, great. That's what we did the year before with Kelly Bryant. If Missouri somehow could win the East, that would be huge. Certainly, they're trying to get this bowl ban reversed. We'll have to find out if that'll happen. I talked to somebody that knows these type of things, and they said don't expect a decision before the season. But hopefully for Missouri, something happens in the next coming weeks. But I just think, kind of everybody's selling him short, similar to how everybody's selling Jalen Hurts short, I believe. And I don't think his degree of difficulty is going to be as hard as the other quarterbacks. And then you look at their schedule. I mean, my gosh, they should be 7-0. Then they get consecutive games against Florida and Georgia. If they could split those two, double-digit win season is very manageable, very, very possible. But again, I think the success of the season, unfortunately, will boil down to what the NCAA does and if they will make them bowl eligible or not.
Brett, as I'm telling my daughter that she needs to get out of the office, I'm working. So listen, that's live people. That's live TV people. So I was think about this with Jacob Eason, okay? Jacob Eason hasn't prepared as the starter. The last time he prepared as the starter, okay, as the starter before that injury 2 years ago was when Jake Fromm was in high school. When last time he consistently prepared as a starter. Jake Fromm's a junior now. He's been out for 2 years. Jacob Eason, 2 years. And that's why I think it's going to be really difficult for him, because you don't just jump back in there like that. He has the ability. He has the arm strength. I've had scouts tell me that it's not about his physical ability. It's about how he understands defenses, how he commands the huddle, how he understands the concepts of the passing game. I think he's going to have the biggest problem, the biggest adjustment, I should say. I agree with Michael. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be anything close to what Baker Mayfield or Kelly Bryant, or Kyler Murray was. But I do think that knowing Lincoln Riley, Lincoln will put him in position to play well, and he's not going to put him in a position to do things that he can't do well. Is that enough for them to win 11, 12 games and to get to the playoff? I'm not sure about that, because they've still got a big game against Texas in there in that conference that they got to get by. So that's also going to be a tough spot. Kelly Bryant, I'm with you guys. He has the easiest track right now to have like that big impact type game. We saw what Derek Dooley did for Drew Lock last year. Imagine that, guys. We're talking about Derek Dooley, how he had a positive impact on a court. It's amazing that we're actually talking about that. But Derek Dooley did a great job with Drew Lock last year. It's going to be interesting to see how that offense, that intermediate to deep downfield passing game, how it helps Drew Lock. And when I was there in the spring, Barry Odom looked at me and said, "Look, I'm telling you right now, he throws the ball deep really well. He's going to be a weapon for us with the deep ball." So that's going to be fun to watch. And then there's Justin Fields. And I'm telling you, I've been saying this now for months. If Justin Fields was a guy that could throw the ball and be successful as a thrower, he would have played last year at Georgia. They would have played him 12, 13, 14 specific plays every single game, not just mop-up time. And that didn't happen. And Kirby showed that he would do that. He once Fromm got in, that was it. It was Fromm's team with the Eason injury. So Fields would have played. So he didn't. And now he goes to Ohio State. He struggles in the spring game. And we're going to see what Ryan Day can do with him. But I don't think they're going to be nearly as aggressive offensively. I don't think they're going to be nearly as prolific offensively as they have been in the past at Ohio State. Your guys' thoughts real quickly on Justin Fields.
For me, I love him. Followed him through recruiting. He can't throw the football. This is a guy we're talking about one of the guys who was one of the best baseball players in the country as well. This guy could throw. It's a matter of understanding the system and what Georgia did and didn't let him do. I know this spring game struggles, changing systems, but he can't throw. Like from a physical tool standpoint, I thought if he was at Penn State, we wouldn't be talking about Sean Clifford right now. We'd be talking about Justin Fields taking over for Tracy McSorley, because he would have beat Sean Clifford out for that job, which is where he was originally committed to. And watching him throw the ball to Justin Shorter, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare in the Big Ten. So I think for him, it's all about the offensive system at Ohio State and getting up to speed.
Yeah, to that point, Michael, real quick, Brett, I will tell you this. I had one coach tell me that he thinks it's going to be a lot like Kyler Murray. He struggled a little bit at Texas A&M the first year. Then when he got to a new place, a new coach, a new feeling, it all clicked for him. Brett, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think of the four, I think he's going to have the toughest transition because he is so young compared to the other ones. And again, last year, Dwayne Haskins just put up monster numbers. I realize, Urban Meyer's gone. Ryan Day is there, the head coach. But I just think he's going to have the toughest transition. It doesn't mean he won't be successful. But bottom line is, if he doesn't beat Michigan, if he doesn't win the Big Ten championship, Ohio State fans are going to be disappointed. Forget about a coaching change. That doesn't matter. Certainly the same. I think Hurts is in the same position in Eason. That's why I think Kelly Bryant, again, going back to him, I think he's in the best position and has the biggest upside, because I don't think a lot of people are expecting a lot out of Missouri. And so, but we'll have to see what happens. But certainly these coaches have shown, getting these transfer quarterbacks is the wave of the future. And it's become a revolving door, and I expect to see a lot more of it in the coming years.
Hey, Michael, great job, man. Thanks so much for helping us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. You guys take it easy.
All right.
Thank you.
Great
Thanks,
night,
Michael.
Hey, Brett, so real quick, we got Scott Seidenberg of NBC Sports Radio on deck right now. But real quick, John in the comments is asking, is Florida for real? That game was horrible, but maybe they aren't horrible. And my thoughts on that were what we talked about earlier, how that week 0 and you don't hit for 9 months, and this is what happens. But, I mean, clearly Felipe Franks is a guy, he's still a work in progress. He is. And, I know Dan Mullen has talked for 8-9 months how this is different. He's going to be different. He's going to have a big season. But man, I still watched that game. I was at that game. We were both there, and he's running out of clean pockets. You can't run out of clean pockets. And he's just, to me, he's still got a little ways to go before you start to think, okay, Florida's the real deal. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I voted him, I think, 8th or 9th on my AP preseason ballot. Every year there's a team, at least one team in the top 10 that finishes the year unranked. I think that team's going to be Florida. I just think they didn't look that good. I know it was the first game. Hey, they won the game. It could be worse. They could be Arizona. So they won the game. But you look at the second half of their schedule, they've got Auburn, they've got LSU, they got at Missouri in there. They also end the season with an improved Florida State team. I didn't think the second half of the season, they go at South Carolina. I mean, there's 5 games they're possibly going to be underdogs in. So what, if they go 3-2, 2-3, then you're looking at 9 wins, maybe 10 wins again. And if they go worse than 2-3, then we're looking at 7 or 8 wins. I don't know. Maybe Mullen will prove us wrong. I know last year after they lost to Kentucky, I talked to some people up at Florida. They were legitimately concerned about Florida getting to a bowl bid.
Right.
After losing that game to Kentucky, and then they end up with double-digit wins, and they wax Florida State, Michigan to end the season. So we'll see. Everyone's overreacting to one game, including us. But I just think long term, that back end of that schedule will catch up with Florida, unless Felipe Franks can consistently be good. And in game 1, he wasn't.
Right. We always go back to the old Spurrier thing too. Well, those guys got to play us too when you start talking about tough schedules. All right, let's bring in Scott Seidenberg from NBC Sports Radio. Scott, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
No problem, guys. And I was listening to your conversation about the transfer quarterbacks, and 2 under the radar guys that you didn't mention that I think are worth mentioning. Tommy Stevens following Joe Moorhead to Mississippi State, I think, is going to be good because he knows that system. He's going to perform for him. And also Shane Buechele going from Texas to SMU. Remember, everyone was ready to anoint this kid when he performed as a freshman. Now he goes over into a Sonny Dykes system. I know he hasn't named the starter yet, but it's probably going to be Buechele. I think he could put up some big numbers.
So, Scott, who do you like out of the initial 4 we talked about? Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma, Justin Fields at Ohio State, Kelly Bryant at Missouri, or Jacob Eason at Washington. Who do you think could make the biggest impact of those 4 transfer quarterbacks?
Well, I think Jalen Hurts is the obvious answer because he's the veteran of the group. But when you look at Jacob Eason, he's playing behind a veteran offense line there. And Washington's probably the best coached team in that conference. If there's a situation for any quarterback to walk into and feel comfortable with, it's going to be Jacob Eason at Washington.
And so this is what we talked about. And I want to get your thoughts on this as well. So Jacob Eason, he literally has not played for 2 years. He hasn't prepared as a starting quarterback where you're going Monday, you're watching film for 6 hours. Tuesday, you're out there practicing and you're going over stuff. Wednesday, you're refining it. Thursday, you're doing walkthrough stuff. He hasn't done that for 2 years now, Scott, where he's the guy. So, I mean, can we expect him to just go right in and all of a sudden the transition's easy and it's fluid and Washington's on their way?
Well, might not be doing it in game situations, but he's doing it with the team. He's doing it with the coaching staff, and he's doing it more importantly with the players that he's going to be playing with this year. So I think establishing that relationship is going to be fun. Yeah, getting hit the first couple of times in a live game might catch up to him, but I think this is a guy who showed what he can do as a starting quarterback in a big-time program. And like I said, playing in probably the best coach system in the conference, I think he's going to be all right.
Yeah, Rusty in our comment section says Washington has an experienced O-line to protect Eason. He ran scout team. He did run scout team. A little bit different from running scout team than the Wait, no, it's not. No, actually, no, it's not different from scout team to Pac-12 defense. I take that back. Washington clearly has a very good defense. Yeah, it's I like Washington. I think Washington could clearly be one of those sleeper type teams to get to the college football playoff. Brett, let's move here real quick and go to those kind of sleeper. Who are your sleeper teams this year? I'll get you and Scott both to talk about that. Speaking of sleeper teams, give me a couple sleeper teams this year, Brett.
Actually, it's funny to call them a sleeper, but I like Utah. They're the preseason pick to win the Pac-12, but that's kind of where the Pac-12 is right now. I really like what they've got. Zach Moss, one of the top running backs in the country. He's back. He's healthy. They're set at quarterback. Tyler Huntley and Jason Shelley, both starting experience. But I think the biggest reason why I like Utah is they've got 6 players with starting experience on the defensive line. Also, Kyle Whittingham wants a more physical offense. They bring in new offensive coordinator, Andy Ludwig. I just really like the Utes. I think this is the year. I think a lot, it's funny to say they're a dark horse when they're the Pac-12 favorite, but they were outside of the top 10 in the preseason rankings. Past 4 years, the college football playoff has had one team that started out of the top 10 that made the field. My pick is going to be Utah to do that this year. With all that being said, they better watch out opening game against BYU and Provo, because that's not going to be easy. BYU had them beat last year and blew that game. 7 of the last 8 games in the series have been decided by 7 points or less. So as much love as I'm giving Utah, part of me actually would not be surprised if they lose to the Cuse.
I mean, it's the Holy War, man. The Holy War that rivalry is so bitter. We talk about Auburn, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. I'm telling you right now, I went there more than a decade ago, all right? And Utah just absolutely annihilated BYU. And I'm on the field, and this Utah fan's holding up this huge sign that read, "Where's your God now?" That's what that rivalry's like, okay? All right. If you want to join us, remember you can do it in 2 ways. In the Fan Cred app, press the fan line button, top right corner of your screen. Our producer will get you on face-to-face with us, or you can ask your questions in the comments box right down below. Scott, who are 1 or 2 of your sleepers right now?
Well, I think if you're talking sleepers, you have to stick in the Pac-12, because if Oklahoma wins the Big 12, maybe you can have the discussion there. You expect the SEC winner, whether it's Alabama or Georgia, to be in, Ohio State or Michigan out of the Big 10, and no one's beating Clemson in the ACC. I think it starts with this Week 1 game for the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah.
If they can beat Auburn, they're going to have a legitimate case if they run through this Pac-12 schedule and win the Pac-12 title, because now you have a win over an SEC team. You're likely going to be an undefeated Pac-12 conference champion, and that gives you the argument. If you're a 1-loss Pac-12 conference champion and your loss is this week to Auburn, you might not have a beef over, let's say, the loser of Alabama, Georgia in the SEC championship game. I'm just sorry, it's not going to happen. So it starts with this week. If Mario Cristobal's group can go out there and win this game, which I don't think they do, but if they do, this is a team that you could be talking about to make the college football playoff.
Right. Scott, man, we really appreciate you joining us, giving your insights. Scott Seidenberg from NBC Sports Radio. Thank you, pal. We really appreciate it.
Anytime. Enjoy it.
So Scott brought up a good question with Tommy Stevens, and we can kind of segue into Penn State as we have Chris Landry's on deck right now. Chris Landry, former NFL scout from Landry Football. Penn State, Brett. I really like James Franklin. I think James Franklin's a terrific coach, great recruiter. Can he get Penn State to the point, you think, where they're in that brutal East Division and where they can contend with Ohio State and Michigan consistently? Because when they won the Big Ten a couple years back, 3 years back now, I believe it was, I mean, the reality is they got screwed, man. They should have been in the playoff, and they got kind of screwed there.
I agree. What I want to see this year is how they do in year 2 without Joe Moorhead. I mean, last year without Moorhead, the offensive numbers dipped big time. Yards per game, points per game. They still had a successful season. So I want to see how they do without Moorhead in year 2 without Joe. I think the pieces are all there for Penn State. You wonder what the situation is going to be like at quarterback with Stevens transferring to Mississippi State to be reunited with Moorhead. But you're right; they should have been in when they won the Big Ten. They didn't get in. This is a big season for for Franklin. And, I look at the projections for them. I see them all over the map. I see them potential top 12, top 15. And then I see other people have them, 25 to 30. And quite frankly, I think they can finish anywhere in there. I think they're one of those teams that are really hard to really peg on what they're going to do this year.
All right, let's bring in Chris Landry, NFL scout, Landry football. Chris, we've been talking about Alabama and Clemson, and will we ever get tired of this? And Brett and I are under the conclusion of, look, man, I want to watch the best ball at the biggest game every year, if that's at all possible. And we start talking about Alabama and Dylan Moses is out for the season and how they just reload talent on those two teams, Chris. Just strictly talent. It's ridiculous how deep they are, right?
Well, it is. They do a great job, first of all, of evaluating. I think that's maybe the most least talked about thing about recruiting is you got to identify the right guys. And they do a great job, both of staffs, of identifying the critical factors at each position. And then they just go out. Obviously, they've got success, but it's a chicken egg thing. They've built not only a reputation of developing players for the next level, building good teams. So it's a vicious cycle if you're trying to beat them. Georgia's kind of right there in terms of talent, but we can talk about it. Our sport, college football, is very much blue bloods. I mean, we can talk about this team and that team. It's pretty much chalk. And maybe now that we've got 4 teams in the playoffs, we can just talk about, well, who's going to be the 4th team? But we can see the 2 teams. I think we'd all probably, I'll speak for myself, but I'd be shocked if Alabama and Clemson are not in it. If something weird's going to have to happen, although something bad's already happened to Alabama.
Right. So Chris, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I talked to a scout about a week after the national championship game last year, and he told me the 2 best players in that field in that championship game, 2 best players, were Trevor Lawrence and Justin Ross, 2 freshmen. How has Dabo done it? How has he got to the point where he's not only recruiting at the same level of Alabama, but he's beating Alabama on players? Justin Ross is from Alabama. He's beating players on Alabama. He's beating everyone else on players. And he really is at the point right now where he's getting who he wants. How has he done that? Is it staff? Is it the staff recruiters? Is it Dabo and his personality the kids and parents and mamas and daddies love? What's the underlying factor there?
Well, it's a combination, but it is stability of staff. So you've got a lot of the same coaches in the same recruiting areas. And obviously Dabo's built a family atmosphere. So kids like that, I think that's really important. But the fact that they've had success with that and stability of developing players. So now, the biggest recruiting thing that you can have is turning in April and see all those defensive linemen walk across the stage and get their jerseys. And now if you're defensive lineman, that's where you want to go. That's D-line you, it's quarterback you, and Trevor Lawrence this and Trevor. Listen, I agree. I think that Trevor Lawrence, as young as he is and is immature and as much as he's got to learn and just normal, there's not a better pro prospect at the quarterback position in college, including last year. So that in and of itself, it kind of recruits itself. If you do a great job in the grassroots areas of developing players, treating players right, you get paid for it on the back end.
So, Chris, are you a Justin Fields guy? Like we were talking earlier, and to me, I look at that and I think if Justin Fields could throw the ball, Georgia would have put him in for a specific number of plays in big games throwing the ball. Now, that said, Kyler Murray did not throw the ball well at Texas A&M his first year, and he ended up being a terrific thrower. So where are you on Justin Fields right now?
Well, I think the key thing, you just hit on it, and I think we're going to see Ryan Day and see whether he's got a little bit of that Lincoln Riley element to him. And that is taking a quarterback and doing what the quarterback can do well. If you say, am I a Justin Fields guy, what are you going to do with him? If I'm going to run a lot of what Georgia likes to run, I'm not quite sure when they recruited him what their plans were, but maybe they evaluated him and thought they might do one thing and then realized that's not ideally what he's suited for. But I think for what Georgia likes to run and have liked to run, that there's no doubt that Fromm was the best fit. I think Justin will play well. They're going to use his legs. You're going to see some boots and waggles and half rolls. You're going to have that run pass option. So when you have that, as you guys know, it creates more spacing and coverage. So the throws are a little bit easier. And that's kind of what I call it, the Lincoln Riley effect. And although Ryan Day's philosophy is a little different. I think you're going to see that. But I haven't seen enough of Justin Fields to say, because I can tell you what he looked like on high school tape and very limited action in practice. It's to be determined. But I'll say this, he better be, because there's not anybody else on that roster that's going to be able to do it. So they're hopeful. I think it's going to work because of how they're going to use him. I don't know that he's for everybody, and I think it just is. That's where styles make fights, styles make schemes, and vice versa.
Right. That's a perfect segue to Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma. I mean, Jalen is not going to be Baker Mayfield. He's not going to be Kyler Murray. But I think Lincoln will find the best way to put him in position to be successful. He'll run stuff that Jalen's comfortable with. He'll do things that will accentuate what Jalen can do well in the passing game. You see the same kind of thing?
Yeah, well, and certainly in that offense, they scheme guys open. So you can make really a high-low read, very simple. It's not sophisticated passing attack. It's about let's go ahead, let's flood the field, and let's call it when you can, at any level of college football, isolate your second, third receiver. The big advantages on the offensive side to the third and fourth corner or safety. In the Big 12, all due respect, it's even a bigger advantage because that's where the skill set advantage is in the Big 12. So I think I'm not saying it's easy. It is quarterback friendly. I'll say this, last year at this time when I was asked about, well, how is Kyler Murray going to do? I thought, he'll do fine. The offense will look a little different. He's mobile. I didn't think he would be as effective as a passer. He's underrated. I think Jalen is underrated as a passer a little bit, but I agree with you. He's not the same type of guy, but don't be surprised if the numbers are really good. Not necessarily Heisman Trophy numbers, but they'll move it. They'll score points. What's going to be interesting is I think they should and will perhaps run the ball a little bit more. I think for them to improve their defense, they got to play more ball control. Like this week against Houston, they can get into a shootout game. If they play defense like they did last year, they might have to win 48-45 or run the football. And Jalen Hurts, as you know, is a different type of runner, more of a fullback, power back type where Kyler Murray is a scoot and get it out there guy and can bail you out of some bad plays. I think that Jalen is more of a drive extender, will protect the football that's ingrained in him. They'll throw it well, but I'm curious to see. I think they can be more of a championship level if they can help their defense out a little bit by playing a little bit more ball control. Because if you go helter-skelter up the field, I don't care what you have, and they don't have great personnel on defense at Oklahoma, it's not going to work. I mean, they're going to have to win shootout games like an NBA game in a regular season.
Right. So Chris, real quick to Kelly Bryant. I mean, I was shocked that Derek Dooley – Derek had never been a play caller, never been an offensive coordinator. The work he did with Drew Lock last year was fantastic. He really started to extend Drew Lock in the intermediate and deep throwing game. And I think they're talking about, as I talked with them in the spring, they're going to do the same thing with Kelly Bryant. And Barry Odom said he's going to be a weapon with the deep ball. Do you see that with Kelly Bryant?
Yeah, I don't see him as good of a passer as Drew, but I do think he has some elements of decision-making that will allow them to run the offense. We'll see. But I think you'll have a little bit of a different element. Listen, Kelly's got mobility, but that's not what they're going to do. He's going to have to throw it and throw it effectively. I like this team. I think what you're going to see is some play action stuff. I think they're going to rely on the running game a lot. I love the tight end. I love the running back. I think they're two of the more underrated players in the country. I think they'll be effective, but I don't think they'll be as dynamic. I think they're going to lean more in the run, more ball control, passing attack. It'll be interesting. Listen, if they can run the football and get the safeties move out of the middle of the field, then it's a little bit easier to throw it when you got the coverage vacated and greater spacing. But I don't know that I see Kelly Bryant doing it as effectively throwing the football downfield. I could be proven wrong this year. Hope I am.
Hey, Chris, great stuff, man. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Good to be with you guys. Appreciate it.
That's Chris Landry football, former NFL scout. Remember, you want to join us here, a couple ways to do it. In the FanCred app, press the fan line button, top right corner of your screen. Our producer will get you in, and you can go face-to-face with us. We've got a couple guys on deck right now, or you can ask your questions in the comment box directly below. And I believe, Brett, we have a Texas fan, Billy, in Austin, Texas, is ready to go. Billy's got something to ask. I'm guessing Billy's going to talk about Longhorns. Are we bringing Billy up? There's Billy. What's going on, Billy?
Hey guys, really enjoying the conversation. Thanks for letting me join in.
Thank you, man. What's going on? What kind of question you got?
All right. Well, first and most importantly, how well do you think the Longhorns are going to do this year? Do you think we'll be better than last?
Brett?
Billy, I'm afraid not. I just think I really like the job Tom Herman's doing. I just think they've had too many personnel losses. And I know everyone, the last image they have is Sam Ehlinger at the Sugar Bowl saying, Longhorn Nation, we're back, baby. But they lost too much on the defense. They lost a ton of senior starters. And you guys have been banged up a little bit in the fall. I just think that catches up to Texas. But the good news is the projections for Texas are all over the map. You've got Sports Illustrated picking them to finish 5th in the country. You've got Colin Wilson, who is over at the Action Network. He has Texas finishing 8th in the Big 12. Yeah, imagine that.
8th in the Big 12?
I don't think it's going to be that bad. Yeah, based on statistical numbers, amount of production returning, all those, crunching all the numbers, that's what spit out. So I think bottom line, they're going to finish at 8-4, 9-3. I think Oklahoma is much better than them. And I think a key is the LSU game. I think LSU wins that game. But if they can win that game, then they're better than I think. I actually think Iowa State will finish 2nd in the Big 12 this year.
8th in the Big 12. I'm not even sure I can name 7 other Big 12 teams. That's a joke. It's a joke, Big 12 fans. It's a joke. 8th in the Big 12 is ridiculous. I mean, come on.
I agree.
I went out there this spring, saw some ball, spent some time with Sam Ehlinger and his family. I mean, Sam is one of those unique cats. He's got a lot of Tim Tebow in him, I'll tell you that. And I agree with you on the defense. They're not as good as they were last year. But at some point, if you're Texas, you got to be at the point where you can just fill guys in, and it's time to go. And you got to look at a guy you recruited and say, look, this is why we recruited you. It's time for you to play. And the reality is it's the Big 12. And the most of the time, for majority of the time, you just got to outscore people. Now, does that mean they could possibly win the Big 12, get to the playoff, and be outmatched because they don't have defense? Sure, it absolutely could mean that. But I would never bet against a guy like Ehlinger in his 3rd year, a guy that's really talented and is really one of those guys that galvanizes the team and makes everybody else around him play better and, more importantly, think they're better than they are. So they want to go out and prove it. I can tell you this, Billy. I like Texas. I like where they're headed with Tom Herman. But Brett has a very good point. They might be a year or two away where you're saying, yeah, I think they can get there the whole way. I think they can win it all.
I mean, another thing real quick. Last year they played 7 unranked teams. All 7 of those games were decided by 7 points or less. They only beat Kansas by 7. Baylor threw one in the end zone. So a lot of those games could have gone another way. If they can't blow out the teams they're supposed to beat pretty bad, that usually catches up to you. Maybe they'll take care of those lesser opponents this year. But again, I agree with Matt. Tom Herman will get this thing going. I just think they were actually probably a little bit better than people thought last year. And I think they're going to regress a little bit in year 2. But then the following years, I see them continuing to build and get Texas back into the college football playoff contention.
All right, Billy. Thanks, man. We appreciate the comment. Appreciate the question. Have a good night, man. All right, that's Billy from Austin, Texas. Brett, we got another guy here. We got Max in Los Angeles. I'm guessing Max is going to want to talk about – what do you think he's going to want to talk about? USC? And we all know where that's headed.
San Jose State.
We're going to bring Max on. Max, what's going on, man?
So I live in Los Angeles reluctantly, but I'm from Austin, Texas. So I'm certainly not going to be asking about USC because, don't care. But my adopted local team, UCLA, because I can, kind of reluctantly root for them. And, last year they were pretty unwatchable, but just curious if Chip Kelly can get anything going this year. Yeah,
it was hideous. I mean, it was hideous, Max. Brett, what's the deal with Chip Kelly? I have my thoughts on it. What's the idea? What happened there in year 2, and how does he get it turned around?
I mean, we're going to find out right away. They have to beat Cincinnati. I mean, that's ridiculous to say you have to beat a group of 5 team in the season opener, but they absolutely have to, because you look at their schedule after that. They could lose 4 or 5 straight. and this is huge for Chip. I mean, he's not used to this. He was 24-2 his last 26 at Oregon, 3-9 last year. They got a ton of talent back, 18, 19 starters back. This is a huge game for Chip. I just wonder if I don't think this is necessarily fair, but I wonder if what he did at Oregon, everybody's doing now, so it's not a novelty. And is that kind of catching up to him? We'll have to find out. And I think, honestly, we don't know yet, but certainly year one, leaves a lot of room for improvement. They have to get to the bowl game this year.
You know what, Max? I think a couple things. Brett brought up a really good point about the spread option offense that he didn't invent. I mean, that was basically a Rich Rodriguez thing years before, but he kind of got it to the point where playing fast and playing that offense was just really hard to stop. And I also think we can't forget what Mike Bellotti did at Oregon, how he set Chip up for success there. And then Chip got in there at the perfect time where USC was struggling a little bit, UCLA struggling a little bit, Los Angeles is wide open for recruits. Oregon is this hip new place to go play football. They got the crazy uniforms. They've got
Willie
Nike
Lyles.
back in. And all of a sudden, Chip can go into Texas and get LaMichael. He can go into Texas and get a quarterback. He can go to other places and get players. He can, most importantly, go into LA and get big-time players. And now he's there at UCLA, and it really wasn't set up for him. They're really in a position where they're down and they need talent. And it's just there's no vibe there right now. And I think that's part of the problem too, as well as, like Brett said, I think everybody's caught up with it. Not really caught up with it, but everybody knows what it is. And you've got to have an elite quarterback to play at a high level in that system. And right now, he does not have an elite quarterback. He might get there eventually, but right now he's not there. All right. Thanks, Max. Really appreciate it, man. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Brett, when Max came on, I thought he was going to talk about USC, and we're going to have to get into this at some point because this is the 400-pound gorilla hanging out in the room with us. Because at some point, if USC doesn't do what they're supposed to, and Lynn Swann has said the expectation is to win the Pac-12. USC doesn't win the Pac-12, and they've got a brutal schedule, and it might be goodbye to Clay Helton, and then that job's open. And there's a guy, a pretty good coach, who's won a little bit at a couple other Power 5 schools, who's now doing some TV work, I think, out in L.A. and Fox. It's interesting that he chose L.A. to do his TV work, So Herb's going out to L.A. every week. He's on the Fox program. You think when Herb goes out there, probably Thursday, right? Pre-show stuff, Thursday, stays through Sunday. You think he talks to any high school coaches out there just to say, hey, what's going on? How you guys doing? Yeah. I think at some point, if it doesn't work out for Clay Helton, I think this is going to be the job that pulls Herb back because it's going to be really hard for him to say no to a situation like USC where you can pick whoever you want out of the most talent-rich place in America, and he could bring USC back, win a national championship, and become the first coach to win a college football national championship 3 different places. Imagine that.
Will he wear his Florida shirt?
You mean before or after he wins it all at USC?
During, who knows? And it's it sucks for Clay Helton, but you look at the schedule, they're probably going to start 2-4, maybe 3-3 is optimistic. Graham Harrell, the new offense coordinator. What's funny is I actually talked to Lane Kiffin last month, and I asked him about Clay Helton and the pressure that he's under. He brought up a very good point that relates not only to USC, but pretty much every coaching situation. He said when you're, quote, on the hot seat, which obviously Helton is on every hot seat list there is in America, when you're on the hot seat and you lose a game, it's the coach's fault. When you're not on the hot seat, like a Nick Saban or Tom Herman or Lincoln Riley, you lose a game or things don't go right, it's the player's fault. It's not the coach's fault. And I never really looked at it that way. And it's almost like once you're on the hot seat, you really have no chance to get off of it because any positives that happen, people kind of dismiss it and move on to the next game. But as soon as something goes wrong, a bad play, a bad result, players get in trouble with the law, whatever it is, then you just pile on to the coach, the fan base does. And I think that rock has started, that pebble has started down the mountain and it's gaining momentum. And, I don't see him getting out of it. And I agree. I think Urban will coach next year, but he will coach somewhere where he can win a national championship. He's not going to coach at Kansas like Les Miles or Mack Brown at North Carolina. He wants to go in somewhere where he can win a national championship. And certainly USC is a handful of programs that would fit what I think he's looking for.
All right, we got a bunch of guys right now dropping us questions. Again, we don't have much time left, but if you want to get in real quick, in the FanCred app, press the fan line button in the top right corner of your screen. Our producer will get you face-to-face with us, or you can ask questions in the comments box, which is directly below. All right, here's a question, Brett, and I know you're going to love this question because I dig it too. Bauer asks, somebody please give me a Mike Leach question. I'm going to give a Mike Leach story. I'm going to give you a great Mike Leach story, and I know you have one too. So my Mike Leach story is one of the first times I talked with Mike. This was probably, 14, 15 years ago. He's at Texas Tech, and I'm talking to him on the phone. And we were talking probably 20 minutes, okay? And the first 15 had nothing to do about football. We're just talking life. So we're talking, and all of a sudden, I hear the toilet flush. And I said, Mike, are you in the bathroom? And he goes, yeah, man, I had to go. So give me your best Leach story.
I can't say it publicly. Sorry. Sorry to do that to you. I appreciate the question. I love Mike Leach. He's unbelievable. There's a million stories like that, and he is one of a kind, no question.
He is a unique cat, man. You don't have to be a college football fan to love that guy. He's just a unique dude. All right, let's go through some conference by conference picks. Then we'll get into our CFP picks. And this conference by conference picks, they kind of coincide with a couple of questions here in the questions box. We'll start with the SEC, Brett. And one of the headlines within the SEC is, can Joe Burrow be the player that pushes LSU over the top? And who's your pick in the SEC?
I think LSU, if you look at the top 5 talented teams, best teams in the country, I think LSU is one of the best 5 teams. I just think, though, with the schedule, they're not going to finish. They're going to finish outside the top 10. It's just so brutal. What I want to see out of Joe Burrow, and I don't know the answer to your question, because you look at the first 9 games of last year, Burrow 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. The last 4 games of the season, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. LSU averaged 100 more yards per game those last 4 games, including that Fiesta Bowl win against UCF. So I'm excited to see what happens. We talked about Texas earlier. Week 2 in Austin is a huge game for both programs. Yeah. I know people say you can lose early and still make it to the college football playoff. I disagree. The loser of this game is out of running for the college football playoff, because the committee will not select a team with 2 losses. And that means the loser of this game has to run the table in their league, and that simply is not going to happen.
Yeah, that's brutal. I'll tell you this. I love Joey Burrow, man. I think he's a terrific kid. He's done so much for that. He's given that team an identity. But I'm going to say that I'm going with Georgia in the SEC. I think this is Georgia's year, man. Because if it's not, Brett, if they can't get it done now with that offensive line, with the guys they got on defense, with the running backs, if they can't get it done now, I mean, at what point does it not happen for them? You know what I mean? I mean, they're so loaded right now, talent-wise. I'm going Georgia in the SEC. Let's go with the ACC, and this brings up a question. One of the questions, this is from Bruce, who says, Florida State, you buying maybe next year? And so within our headline of the ACC, can FSU rebound with James Blackman running Kendall Browse's offense?
Absolutely. I think they can, and they will. I think they'll end up about 6-7 wins, which is what Willie needs to do. He needs to get Florida State to a bowl game. Well, I know we both talked to Willie in the past couple months, and I think Florida State will show a great deal of improvement. You know, today Florida State put out a statement that they're monitoring the weather. There's a possibility the Boise State game could get postponed, could get canceled. They may move the kickoff up to noon. Certainly, I hope this game gets played because it's a big game for Florida State. But I do expect to see a lot of improvement out of the Noles, similar to when Willie Taggart was at USF, struggled early, and then in a couple of years he had him double-digit wins.
Yeah, I can tell you this about Kendall Browse. You know, Willie tried to get Kendall Browse initially when he first got to Florida State and couldn't do it. I'm a big track record guy. Kendall, success at Baylor, success at FAU, success at Houston. His quarterbacks are good. His offenses are prolific. I'm betting on that, and I think James Blackman gets it done. Clearly, Clemson is my pick in the ACC. Let's go to the Big Ten. And the headline within the Big Ten, Brett, is, do you believe the Nebraska hype? I was reading some of those Nebraska newspapers in the state of, Omaha and Lincoln. There's some of those guys are talking about maybe even unbeaten regular season, 12-0.
Yeah, I love Scott Frost. I really think Nebraska will be improved. But yeah, I mean, you look even at the odds of Vegas, Nebraska is like the 10th favorite to win the national title.
How is that possible?
Everyone's looking at what he did at UCF in year 2, and I understand that. Adrian Martinez is a dynamic player. He is great, but still, I think that's too big of a leap. The Big Ten West is the most competitive conference or division out there. You and I could both pick 2 teams each, but we may not pick the eventual champion.
Right.
That's how much up in the air it is. Nebraska will be better, but yeah, the hype has got out of control for the Huskers. Maybe year 3, but not in year 2.
Who's winning the Big Ten?
Michigan. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I know they haven't beat Ohio State. If this isn't the year, then when is it? They get Ohio State in Ann Arbor. I think Josh Gaddis, if Harbaugh will let him run the offense, they will be much improved offensively. The schedule breaks pretty good for them. They get Notre Dame at home. They get Ohio State at home. They do have to go at Penn State, at Wisconsin. But I think this is finally the year. And certainly that Ohio State game, the pressure's on Harbaugh, not Ryan Day. Harbaugh's going to be hearing it. If you can't beat the first-year coach from Ohio State, when are you ever going to beat the Buckeyes?
Right. I love Adrian Martinez. I think he's a really, really special player. But I'll tell you what, man, he can't be better than Mackenzie Milton, at least not right now, because I saw Mackenzie Milton. I know how good Mackenzie Milton was. That's number one. And number 2, Nebraska's not playing ECU.
That's it right
not
there.
Playing Navy. So I think it's really easy to make those comparisons, but it's a whole other level in the Big Ten. I'm going with Ohio State. I think Ryan Day is going to figure out a way to use Justin Fields, what he does best. He may not be the thrower that they've had there, but I think they'll figure it out. And I'm going with, look, until Michigan beats them, I'm picking Ohio State every time. All right, let's move to the Big 12. And we kind of talked about, is Texas back? We talked about that a little bit earlier. You kind of think no. I don't know that they're back yet, but I'm under the conclusion that I think Ellerger can will them there this year. As far as the Big 12, who's your winner? And anyone other than Oklahoma or Texas, can anybody scare anyone?
Absolutely. I love Iowa State. Brock Purdy, 6th in the country last year in passing efficiency. I talked to Matt Campbell last month, and he is psyched about this year's team. They did lose David Montgomery. They did lose Hakeem Butler, wide receiver. But from the people I talked to at Iowa State, they feel like they'll be able to replace both of those guys. And look, the Cyclones went into Norman 2 years ago and beat Oklahoma. They've got to go again this year. I think Oklahoma is the team to beat, no question about it. And I think the biggest reason, not necessarily Jalen Hurts, although Lincoln Riley told me Jalen is a better athlete than Baker Mayfield, but he's a different athlete than Kyler Murray. I think Lincoln is relishing this opportunity to prove people that he can win with a quarterback that basically Alabama discarded. But even with all the talk about Jalen, it's the defense. They've got to be better. I think they will be much better with Alex Grinch. And the Sooners are still the team to beat for me in the Big 12. But I like Iowa State getting to that championship game and playing the Sooners.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I love the fact that you just said that, man. When you said that Lincoln relishes the idea of winning with the Alabama discard, Brett, I literally got a chill when you said that, man. I'm thinking, oh, that is so awesome. That doesn't get you ready for week 1. My God, that's awesome. And I agree with you, Iowa State. I really like that. Matt Campbell's terrific. I don't know how much longer Iowa State can hold on to him. What he did with Brock Purdy last year. Brock Purdy's a really good player, but boy, he got in that once he finally became the starter. He looked so smooth there. That whole staff really got him ready to play, put him in position to have a lot of success, and then he just built on it. He's a guy that is so undervalued right now. No one knows who he is. He's going to have a big year this year. Let's move to the Pac-12. By the way, my pick in the Big 12, I'm going with Texas, man. I think Texas is going to beat Oklahoma. So let's go to the Pac-12 now.
Okay, cool. Hook him.
So we talked about Herb. What is there any other team you think that could be a surprise in the Pac-12?
Yeah, I mean, I think Washington, look, I like Utah, but I think Washington could just as easily win that. They lost everybody on defense. They've led the Pac-12 in defense the last 4 years, but you lose 9 starters off the defense. I think Oregon, I love what Mario Cristobal's doing there. They return literally everybody, most notably Justin Herbert. We find out week 1 out of the gate against Auburn. Are they for real? The biggest issue I've got with Oregon is the last 3 years, they've been terrific at home, but terrible away from Eugene, like 14-4 at home, about 30% winning percentage away from Eugene. That has to change immediately. You've got a new defensive coordinator there. I think Mario Cristobal is pumped about that. He thinks they'll be better defensively. But Matt, again, I talked about Texas LSU, an elimination game. Oregon Auburn, it's an elimination game because either team is going to run the table. Whoever loses that game. Certainly, we're talking about the Pac-12, but if Gus loses that game, he is immediately back on the hot seat. But unfortunately, that's the only game we have week 1 that matches 2 ranked opponents.
Yeah, that, by the way, that hot seat, $26.6 million Auburn's going to owe him if they fire him after this year. That seat's not hot. They're not that dumb. No, where are they going to come up with $26.6 million?
We'll see.
Right.
It's the SEC. Come on.
I agree with you in Oregon, man. If they beat Auburn, they're going to have a lot of momentum. And they've got, probably maybe the best quarterback other than Trevor Lawrence in college football in Justin Herbert, who just throws a beautiful ball. If you haven't watched Justin Herbert, go back, go on YouTube, do whatever you got to do. Watch this kid play. He's a special, special talent. I'm gonna go to Washington, the Pac-12. All right, Brett, one Group of 5 team that's going to make life miserable for the College Football Selection Committee.
Nobody, Matt.
Nobody.
The Group of 5 will have a lot of good teams, but the College Football Selection Committee is never going to put a Group of 5 team in the playoff. Okay, you got to wait 7 years. We go to 8 teams. You got a shot then. They're never going to get in the top 4. However, I do think the best Group of 5 team will be from the American Conference, the Memphis Tigers. Brady White returns a quarterback. They open Saturday at home against Ole Miss. They're almost a touchdown favorite. If they win that game, they will not be challenged until we get to November when they go consecutive games at Houston, at USF, and then the home finale against Cincinnati, who I think actually will beat UCF to win the East. I really like Memphis. They can put up a ton of points. If Mike Norvell's teams can play just a little bit of defense, enough defense, I think they can earn that New Year 6 Group of 5 bid. But unfortunately, don't shoot the messenger. I'm not on the selection committee, but there will never be a Group of 5 team that makes the 4-team play.
All right, I'm riding Charge On, man, at UCF. I'm riding them, man. And the Notre Dame transfer
Homer,
quarterback.
you're Homer. You live in Orlando.
So not anymore. Not anymore. Used to, don't anymore.
That's
so,
true.
All right. Before we get to our college football picks and why, real quick, let's go over your high. Who do you think's got the best chance to win the Heisman? As we're wrapping up here.
Well, Clemson's my national title pick. Trevor Lawrence is my Heisman pick. They're favored by double digits every game. He's going to put up monster numbers. Look, he's got Travis Etienne. He's got Justin Ross. He's got Higgins. I mean, they're loaded offensively. The question is he not going to play in the second half of games similar to Tua last year? But for me, it's Trevor Lawrence. All
right, I told you earlier that I'm going Georgia in the SEC, but I'm not going Georgia overall. I just can't. I'm not betting against that offense at Clemson. That's going to. I guarantee you by the end of the year we'll set an NCAA record for points scored in the season. They're going to break Florida State's record from 2013 with Jameis and that group. They're going to be ridiculous on offense, and they're young on defense, but they've got some really good players, young guys on that defensive line too. So I'm going with Clemson. My Heisman pick, I got to go with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, just because going into it, he's the guy. He's the guy that everybody's talking about now. And if they do on offense what we think they're going to do, how do you go against that guy? And I mean, I'm with you on that one. I think there's no doubt about it. That's it. All right, that's going to do it for us here. We'll be back, I'm sure, another time on this Stadium Fan Cred College Football Live show. And come back and see us next time, man. We'll tweet it out. We'll let you know when we're going. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Brett.